Okay, so we're starting chapter 6 now, which is solving inequalities using addition and subtraction. Our first learning target is I can graph and solve one-step inequalities. First thing you're going to need to know is what exactly an inequality is. So we had equations like 6x equals 12 that we were solving before. But now, instead of having this equal sign, we're going to have one of the following symbols below. So you could have this symbol. I bet a lot of you learned about alligator mouth in eating the larger number back in maybe elementary school. But first we're going to talk here about what exactly each symbol means. So the first symbol right here, this one, this is a greater than. So this is greater than. So you could write x is greater than 4. So what would be some numbers that are greater than 4? So x could be, 5, x could be 6, x could be 7. Could x be 4? Is 4 greater than 4? It's not, so it couldn't be 4, but it could be 5, 6, 7, 8. It could even be 4.01. You could even have some decimals in there. This next one right here, this is the less than sign. And I remember that this is less than because this looks more like an L to me than the first one does. So if I were to kind of tilt this a little bit, it would be like an L. So if you tilted your screen to the left, that's going to look more like an L to me than the first one. So if I have x is less than 4, what are some numbers that x could be? Well, x could be, let's see here. What are numbers less than 4? Well, there's going to be a lot of them, right? So could x be 4? No, but it could be 3.999, right? It could be 3. It could be 0. It could be a -1. There's a bunch of numbers that it could be. Now the difference between 3 and 4 right here, when I all of a sudden add this line underneath my inequality, means that it is, this first one is going to be less than or equal to, meaning if I have x less than or equal to 4, that means x could be 4. And then my next example here, if I have greater than or equal to, that means if I have x is greater than or equal to 4, that also means that x could equal 4. Number 5, this is your equal to. And then number 6 is not equal to. So for example, if you ended up with 5 equaling 6, well that's not true, so we put a slash to the equal sign, so it would not be equal to.
Okay, so just a couple examples of our inequalities. We're going to write out what this one means. So we have x is greater than -4. A couple examples of numbers that are greater than -4. Think of that number line, but we have, why isn't this working? -3.5 maybe, 0, you could pick 10. So any number larger than -4, but because it doesn't have the equal to symbol, it cannot be -4. The second one is read x is less than -4. So a couple of those examples could be -4.1. It could be -5. Okay, we're going to draw a graph for each of these inequalities. So a couple tricks when you're graphing, make sure that your variable is on the left. So in this case we have x on the left. If you do that, you'll be able to use this awesome trick. Because there's an equal to symbol underneath that, that means it's a closed circle. So I'm going to put a closed circle at the number +6. And then this trick, as long as your variable is on the left, you are going to make that inequality look like an arrow. Whatever direction that arrow is pointing is the same direction your graph will point. So for example, in number 2, that x is not on the left. So I'm going to rewrite that. So x is on the left, 1 is on the right, and this inequality in the middle needs to point towards the 1. So I'm going to point that towards 1. And then I also can't forget that equal to symbol that goes along with it. So because there's an equal to symbol, it means it's a closed circle at the number +1. And then I'm going to draw my graph the same direction that my inequality is pointing. And again, make sure when you draw your graph to make sure you clearly show which direction that arrow is pointing and whether it's an open or closed circle. It's very important that that's very clear. Otherwise, you might lose some points there. Try the third one on your own and then press play. Or push pause, try it on your own, then press play and check your work. Alright, check your work. Make sure you change that variable to the left so that you have an open circle and it's pointing the correct direction towards the right. When we are writing, we're working backwards, so it's a right inequality that is represented by a graph. There's a couple things you have to look at. You have to look at where is that dot, is it closed circle or open circle, and which direction is it pointing. So you get to pick your variable. So in this case, my variable is x. My number is 3. And I always want my variable on the left so I can use this trick. But since my graph is pointing towards the right, my inequality is also going to point towards the right. And because this circle is closed, I'm going to have a line underneath it. So that represents that x is greater than or equal to 3. So we're going to do that same thing for the second one. I'm going to pick my variable, so x. I'm going to write that number wherever my dot is at. So in this case, it's -2. It is pointing towards the left. So I'm going to copy that up here as my inequality is a less than. And because that's an open circle, I have no equal to symbol below it, or line. So that would be your answer for that inequality. Okay, so for another example here, we have for a given value, in this case our given value is that b equals 8, state whether the inequality is true or false. So we are going to plug in, or substitute in for b, we're going to substitute 8. So I have 9 plus 8 is less than 16. And then I'm going to solve this. So 9 plus 8 is 17. And copy down the rest of that inequality. And you have to ask yourself, is 17 less than 16? If you say no, we're going to cross out that inequality because it is not less than 16. And we're going to write that 8 is not a solution. Oops.
The last few examples that we're going to look at here are solving and graphing each inequality. So this is really what our learning target is getting at. So what we're going to do for number 1 is we want to get our variable, which in this case is t, alone. So I'm going to draw a line down from my inequality sign, just like we did with equal signs. I've got t minus 4. Well, what's the opposite of a minus 4? It's adding 4. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. The -4 and the 4 cancel. So I have t, copy down the inequality sign, and then 2 plus 6 is, 2 plus 4 equals 6, or is 6. So now I'm going to go ahead and graph this. So on my number line, I'm going to go over to 6. Because there's not a line underneath my inequality, it's an open circle. One way I like to remember that is because there's less ink, right? Because I don't have that line underneath my inequality, so there's less ink on my circle. And then I use the shortcut, so kind of make an arrow, right? So I know that my arrow is going to go to the right as well. Something that you need to be careful of or be aware of is on tests and quizzes, you really need to make sure that me and Ms. Zarnes know which way your arrow is facing. So if that's using colored pencils, a highlighter, whatever it is you need to do, but please make sure that it's very clear to us if it's an open or closed circle in which direction the arrow goes. Now I'm going to have you try 2 on your own. So if you'd like to pause the video and do that now, you can. Otherwise, if you'd like to jump down to 3, we're going to do 3 together, and then I'll show you the answers for number 2 and 4. So number 3, again, I'm going to draw the line down from my inequality sign. I want to get my variable by itself. So I've got r minus 7. So I'm going to do r plus 7 on both sides. 8 plus 7 is 15. I copy down my inequality sign, bring down the r, and I notice that I have a problem because my variable is not on the correct side. So I'm going to switch it so that r is on the left side, 15 is on the right. The arrow pointed to the 15, so my inequality is still going to point to the 15. So this is my answer for 3. We're not actually going to graph number 3 or number 4 because they go off the grid a little bit. So don't worry about that. But if you would pause the video now, do numbers 2 and number 4. Like I said, please don't graph number 4, but do graph number 2. So check your work. As you can see for number 2, I've got a closed circle. The arrow points to the left. And then if you look, hopefully as you saw your answer for number 4, its K is less than 27, which is why we didn't have you graph that. But make sure when you're writing your final answers that you are putting your variable on the left side. That will be something that we're expecting you to do.